300,000 years ago, a different humanity walked a different Earth. It was a world populated by titans, elephants that dwarfed buildings, bulls whose horns spanned the width of a river, and great baboons of terrifying strength that hunted our own kind. This is not fantasy. This was the lived reality for our direct ancestors, for the first Homo sapiens who saw it all with their own eyes. This is the story of an Africa that has vanished forever. If the entire chronicle of life on Earth were compressed into a single 24-hour day, our species would appear just 8 seconds before the stroke of midnight. 8 seconds. 350,000 yet, in that flicker, the world has been altered beyond all recognition. A journey back to that dawn would reveal a landscape at once familiar and profoundly alien, a crucible that was both our cradle and our potential grave. Imagine materializing in the African savanna of the deep past. The sun is a merciless weight. The horizon shimmers with a heat that distorts reality. And then the ground begins to vibrate, a low, persistent thrumming that grows in intensity until the very air seems to tremble. From behind a rise, a silhouette emerges, vast and unbelievable. It is an elephant, but the proportions are all wrong. It is taller, impossibly more massive, with tusks that sweep down to nearly touch the earth. This is Paleoloxodon iolensis, the largest land mammal in the planet's history. 4.2 meters at the shoulder, a height that would look down upon the second story of a modern house. A weight of 15.5 tons, the equivalent mass of 3 of today's largest African bull elephants stacked one atop the other. This single mammal outweighed the largest carnivorous dinosaurs ever to walk the earth. But its size was only the beginning of its formidable nature. Its tusks were weapons of geological force, nearly straight and slung low, transforming the animal into a living bulldozer. Bony crests on its skull anchored muscles of such impossible power that a single strike could shatter the trunk of an ancient tree. Any rational creature would understand. This was a force of nature with which one did not trifle. And yet evidence suggests our ancestors did more than trifle. They hunted them, while direct proof remains elusive for Homo sapiens. In Africa, their hominin cousins in Eurasia regularly brought down these titans with hand-thrust spears. Our ancestors by this time had perfected a far more effective weapon, the throwing spear. An encounter would have been an event of unimaginable rarity, an act of supreme danger. But the fact that it was even possible speaks to a level of courage or desperation that defies modern comprehension. The Titan elephant, however, was far from the only beast capable of ending a human life in an instant. If Paleoloxodon inspired awe through its sheer scale, another creature provoked a more primal, visceral terror. Meet Syncerus antiquus, the giant long-horned buffalo. Standing nearly 2 meters at the shoulder, taller than most moose, its true menace was written in the architecture of its skull. Its horns, a sweeping arc of solid bone, measured 3 meters from tip to tip. To look back is to see a world of impossible scale, a crucible that forged human ingenuity from the fires of terror and necessity. The monsters are gone, but their ghosts linger in our deepest instincts, a silent testament to the planet that was and the species that endured to inherit its shadow. Its form was a testament to raw power, a living sculpture of dense, interwoven muscle. Beneath this muscular mantle lay a skeleton of formidable density, bones so robust that even the jaws of the era's apex predators struggled to find purchase, let alone fracture. Its weight exceeded 2 tons, a mass comparable to the modern white rhinoceros, the largest land mammal of its kind on Earth today. But this comparison is deceptive. For the rhinoceros, a significant portion of its bulk is a shield of armored hide. The great buffalo, Syncerus antiquus, wore no such armor. Its mass was an almost pure expression of biological force, bone, sinew, and a tide of muscle, with only a whisper of keratin reserved for its armament. And what an armament it was! The horns, each a great scythe curving gently outwards, measured more than 1 meter in length. From tip to distant tip, the span could reach 3 meters, the full length of a modern basketball backboard. It was a crown of bone, wider than that of most horned dinosaurs, including creatures that dwarfed it 3 times over. These titans moved in great herds, their passage carving permanent trails through the ancient savanna. They were not difficult to find, their very presence reshaped the landscape, but to find them was a proposition vastly different from confronting them. We know this from the silent testimony left on stone. Across the rock faces of Africa, one scene of violence is rendered more than any other: the clash of the great buffalo. Horns locked, earth trembling, 2 bulls locked in a primal duel. This image of intra-species combat was depicted with such frequency that it stands as the most common scene of violence in all of African rock art, a testament to a creature born with a hair-trigger temper. Add to this fury, speed. They could achieve 56 kilometers per hour. Imagine it: a 2-ton battering ram, crowned with a 3-meter span of sharpened keratin, charging at the speed of a vehicle. Anything in its path, with the possible exception of the colossal straight-tusked elephant, Paleoloxodon, would simply be erased from the face of the earth. And yet they were hunted, not only by our direct ancestors, but by a cast of characters long since vanished from the world stage. For what many forget is that evolution is not a clean ascent, a ladder with one species neatly replacing the last. It is a sprawling, tangled bush, a chaos of branching possibilities. And 300,000 years ago, that bush was exceptionally dense. In Africa alone, the continent that would become our cradle, at least 4 distinct species of the genus Homo walked the earth. There was Homo sapiens, us. There was Homo naledi, the enigmatic man of the caves. There was Homo rhodesiensis, the Rhodesian man. And there was Homo heidelbergensis, the Heidelberg man. They did not necessarily occupy the same territory at the same moment, but their timelines overlapped. Encounters were inevitable. Of all these parallel humanities, perhaps the most enigmatic was Homo naledi. Had one of our ancestors encountered them in the dappled light of a forest, the recognition would have been immediate and unsettling. They were not us. A small stature housed one of the smallest brains in the entire Homo lineage. Long, curved fingers and powerful arms spoke not of the open plains, but of a life spent in the trees, an echo of the far more ancient Australopithecines. They were a ghost from our own deep past, living alongside our present. No tools have ever been found with them, no artifacts to suggest a complex culture. Their story is written instead on their teeth, worn down to their very roots from a diet of tough, gritty foods scavenged from the soil. But with another contemporary, Homo heidelbergensis, the lines were far more blurred. They stood as tall as we did. Their skulls housed brains of a comparable volume. This was the world into which our species was born, a world not of singular humanity, but of many. A landscape stalked by behemoths of pure muscle, where the difference between hunter and hunted was a razor's edge. It was a time when the question, "What is human?" had no single answer, only a spectrum of possibilities, each fighting for survival under an African sun. And in that brutal, vibrant past, the thunderous charge of the great buffalo was not just a threat. It was the very pulse of a world now lost to time. They harnessed fire, a flickering beacon against an ancient darkness. They built shelters, the first true homes. They crafted spears, turning stone and wood into instruments of dominion. They even conceived of art, the first whispers of a symbolic world. Spreading from the heartlands of Africa, they would eventually venture beyond its shores, a testament to their resilience. But these were not our direct familiar ancestors. There was a profound nuance to their existence. Their anatomical architecture was a thing of brutal power, more akin to the Niti that speaks of a life of immense physical stress. Their musculature was a tapestry of force that a modern heavyweight athlete could only dream of possessing. In a raw contest of strength between a modern human and this Heidelberg man, the outcome would be swift and absolute. You would not be the victor. These were not scavengers lurking in the shadows. They were specialized, apex hunters of megafauna. On the sweeping plains of prehistoric Africa, They stood against the charging fury of the giant buffalo, Syncerus antiquus, and faced down the monolithic power of the rhinoceros. Their encampments are a testament to their prowess, littered with the colossal remains of butchered animals, a library of their conquests. Yet perhaps their most profound secret lies not in their brawn, but in their voice. Analysis of their hyoid bone, a delicate structure in the throat essential for speech, reveals a stunning possibility. They could speak, not in the grunts or roars of a simple beast, but with the articulated sounds of an early language. Imagine the scene, two distinct lines of humanity converging on a riverbank. Our own ancestors, Homo sapiens, and a group of Homo heidelbergensis. Both command the use of fire, both hunt the same formidable prey, both possess the gift of language. What unfolded in those moments lost to time? Was their conflict born of competition? Was their trade an exchange of tools and knowledge? Or was there something more intimate, a shared understanding that transcends the species barrier? Some research whispers of this possibility, suggesting that their blood may still flow within our own, a ghost in our genome. A few scientists go further, proposing that they are not a cousin, but our direct progenitor. The evidence remains tantalizingly scarce, the mystery unsolved, but the very possibility is a haunting echo from our own deep past. Yet in this ancient world, there were shadows far more primal than any rival hominin. The question remains whether the first Homo sapiens ever came face to face with one of the most terrifying primates in the planet's history. Its name is a warning, Dinopithecus, literally the terrible ape. It is a title it earned in every conceivable way. This was a baboon, but one sculpted from nightmare. Larger than the average man, it weighed up to 77 kilograms of pure, dense muscle, built upon a frame of shocking power. Its skull was formidable, housing a set of canine teeth a full 20% larger than those of the most powerful baboons creature of the earth, striding across the open plains with an unnerving confidence, the very same landscapes our own ancestors called home. Its diet was a chilling deviation from the norm. While its modern relatives subsist on grasses, roots and fruit, Dinopithecus craved flesh. It was a selective omnivore that consumed more meat than any other primate of its time. Some paleontologists now believe that the smaller, more vulnerable hominins of the era, such as Australopithecus, may have featured on its menu. Pause for a moment and construct the scene. You are an early hominin, standing barely 1.3 meters tall. From the tall grass emerges this creature. It is your equal in height, but perhaps 3 times your strength, with fangs that belong on a saber-toothed cat. By the time our own species arrived, we were larger and our technology was more advanced. Perhaps we were no longer easy prey. Perhaps. But if the terror of Dinopithecus is in its brutal power, another creature from this lost world offers a strangeness of a different order entirely. Sometimes, the most astonishing feature of a long-extinct animal is one that cannot be seen in its fossilized bones. Meet Rusingorix, an antelope that, at first glance, seemed utterly unremarkable. A relative of the modern wildebeest, it possessed a slightly longer neck and a more robust build, but otherwise it was a common herbivore of the plains. That illusion, however, would have shattered the moment it opened its mouth. The past is not a simple line leading to us. It is a chaotic garden of discarded experiments and forgotten marvels. For every creature that seems familiar, there is another that defies our neat categorizations. A living paradox that reminds us that the world we inhabit is but one possibility among infinite, silenced alternatives. Within the fossilized skull of an extinct antelope, a secret lay coiled. When paleontologists examined the remains of Rusingorix, they were confronted with an anatomical riddle. Deep within its nasal cavity were vast, hollow tubular stura that simply should not have been there. And yet, it was hauntingly familiar. The exact same complex architecture is found in one other place in the Grand Museum of Life, the skulls of hadrosaurs. These were the great duck-billed dinosaurs, titans of the Cretaceous period, who vanished from the Earth 66 million years ago. Here was an African antelope, separated from the dinosaurs by an impassable gulf of time, which had somehow resurrected their most peculiar feature. This was convergent evolution at its most profound, a ghost from another age whispering through the vessel of a modern mammal. The question was not just how, but why. The answer lies on the vast open plains where both creatures made their lives. Both the hadrosaurs and Russingorix moved in immense herds, their survival dependent on constant communication across great distances. This shared challenge forged a shared solution. The intricate nasal crest was not for display, but for sound. It was a biological trombone, capable of producing calls of such a low frequency that they plunged deep into the realm of infrasound, far below the threshold of human hearing. Imagine standing on the Pleistocene savanna as a herd of these animals grazed nearby. To our ears, there would be an unnerving, absolute silence, yet the air itself would seem to vibrate with an unseen energy. Hundreds of individuals would be conversing, calling, warning, and challenging one another in a rich symphony we could never hear. All a human observer would perceive is a strange, resonant pressure in the chest, and a primal, nameless anxiety stirred by a conversation conducted on the very edge of perception. But for Rusingorix, this silent symphony would become its funeral dirge. Its unique adaptation made it a target. This is the one animal on this list for which we have direct, brutal evidence of mass hunting by Homo sapiens. In Kenya, archaeologists unearthed what can only be described as a prehistoric abattoir. The remains of an entire herd, their bones systematically fractured and bearing the telltale marks of stone tools. Our ancestors, it seems, had learned to interpret their silent calls, driving the herds into traps for systematic slaughter. Some researchers believe that we were not just a predator, but the primary cause of their final disappearance. Yet not every giant of this lost world fell so easily to our ancestors' spears. There were those we did not hunt, but fled from. We know the warthog through caricature, a charming, harmless buffoon from animated films. We are invited to forget this image, for its ancestor was an absolute monster. Meet Metridiochurus, a giant extinct warthog that stalked the same African landscapes. At a glance, its proportions were familiar, its body shape a near-perfect echo of its modern descendants. But there was one crucial, terrifying difference: scale. Metridiochurus had the bulk and stature of a horse, with some specimens growing even larger. This was not fat, it was a compact, dense mass of bone and muscle. One species was so powerfully built, it was named Metridiochurus compactus. And then there was its armament. It wielded 4 tusks, 2 jutting from the upper jaw and 2 from the lower. They were longer, straighter, and far sharper than those of any iked tail of a stegosaurus, a living thagomizer of muscle and bone. Modern warthogs can be irritable, aggressive, and unpredictable. Now imagine that same temperament scaled up to the size of a horse, carrying half a ton of condensed fury and armed with 4 bone daggers. Metridiochurus was a diurnal creature, grazing in open spaces across almost the entirety of Africa. For the early humans who shared its territory, an encounter was not a possibility. It was an inevitability, and it was almost certainly a terrifying one. The further we peer into this recent past, the more the map of the world begins to warp. It was a planet of familiar faces in unfamiliar places. Great herds of zebra thundered not across the Serengeti we know, but across a Sahara that was not yet desert, but a vast green savanna. The familiar, elegant silhouette of the giraffe cast its long shadow not only over African acacia, but across the plains of what is now Turkey. A species slightly taller than today's, regularly wandering out of its ancestral continent. These are not creatures of some impossibly distant alien epoch. They are ghosts from our own worlds yesterday, phantoms from an Earth that existed just a geological heartbeat ago. They are a testament to a planet far more dynamic and strange than the one we have inherited. The silence they left behind is a reminder that the world we inhabit is merely a single frame in a much longer, wilder, and more astonishing film. A world whose greatest chapters may have already been written in bone and stone. Its fossilized remains whisper tales from the sun-scorched earth of the Middle East to the ancient riverbeds of Turkey. But among these ghosts of the Pleistocene, one giant stands apart: the steppe rhinoceros. While its modern cousins are bound to the warm climes of Africa and Asia, this creature was a pioneer, a wanderer on a planetary scale. It embarked on an impossible journey, crossing the land bridge that once connected continents. More than 200,000 years ago, it roamed the landscapes that would one day become Canada, a testament to its extraordinary resilience. The key to its pioneering spirit was an adaptation rare among its kind: a shaggy woolen coat. It was not the dense, heavy fleece of its more famous contemporary, the true woolly rhinoceros, but a mantle sufficient to grant it passage into the cooler, unforgiving regions of the north. It was an animal built for a world of vast grassy plains and biting winds. And wherever this formidable beast ventured, it was not alone. It was shadowed by another great migrant, a new and cunning predator. Across its vast domain, from Europe to the Levant, the archaeological record tells a story of systematic pursuit. On stone tools unearthed in Jordan, dating back 250,000 years, scientists have discovered the faint spectral signature of its proteins, a direct, undeniable link between the hunter's blade and the hunted's flesh. This was a relationship of profound consequence. Butchered remains show that entire carcasses were expertly processed. More hauntingly, some skulls were preserved, carried back to ancient shelters, perhaps as trophies, grim monuments to a successful and perilous hunt. And yet, when the steppe rhinoceros vanished some 35,000 years ago, it was not the treat, and the glacial epoch was drawing to a close. The cold, arid grasslands it depended upon were disappearing, and with them the rhino was doomed, regardless of our presence. This creature's fate forces us to confront a far greater mystery, a puzzle written across the continents. When we conjure images of the lost world our ancestors knew, we see saber-toothed cats, colossal mammoths, and giant ground sloths, but these are phantoms primarily of Eurasia, the Americas, and Australia, the straight-tusked elephant Paleoloxodon, the giant buffalo, Syncarus antiquus, Anis. In the Americas, the end of the Ice Age claimed nearly 80% of all large animal species. In Australia, the toll was even higher. Eurasia lost its mammoths, its woolly rhinos, its cave lions, and its giant deer. But in Africa, the elephants remained. The rhinoceroses, both black and white, remained. The giraffes, the zebras, the lions, the hyenas, the buffalo, the great assembly of megafauna endured. Why? Perhaps the answer lies in a long and bloody history. African animals evolved over millennia alongside our own species, locked in a biological arms race. They learned to fear the upright ape, to recognize its lethal ingenuity. Or perhaps the continent's climate was more resilient, its ecosystems less shattered by the planet's tectonic shifts in temperature. Or maybe, in the grand indifferent lottery of extinction, Africa simply drew a winning ticket. The truth, however, is more profound. We search for the strange and the wondrous in the deep past, in the fossil record, but we are looking in the wrong place. The truly extraordinary creatures, the survivors of that lost world, are still here. The elephants, who mourn their dead with a memory that spans generations. The rhinoceroses, whose armored silhouettes are living echoes of a prehistoric age. The giraffes, whose impossible necks defy the very logic of anatomy. The hyenas, whose bone-crushing jaws are the most powerful of any mammal on Earth. These are not merely animals, they are miracles of persistence. They are the living relics who survived ice ages, volcanic cataclysms, and the rise of the planet's most effective predator, ourselves. The most astonishing beasts of the Pleistocene still walk among us. It is our solemn duty to ensure they do not become the ghosts of our own time. The mind recoils at the thought of a journey into such a deep past. If one could stand on the ancient plains of Africa, which ghost would you choose to face? Would it be the straight-tusked elephant, Paleoloxodon, a creature of impossible whose presence alone was a declaration of nature's untamed power. For the truly brave, there was Dinopithecus, the terrible ape. To look into the eyes of this formidable primate would be to see a disquieting reflection of our own lineage, a test of courage against a forgotten branch of the family tree. These choices, however, exist only in the theatre of the mind. The arrival of modern humans on these landscapes marked the beginning of an end. The world of titans faded, leaving behind only bone and mystery, a silent testament to a grandeur that we will never truly know.